Hi. So the scientific method is probably humanity's best invention, but the science ecosystem and the incentives that exist are broken. So we think we can help fix that using the blockchain. Hi everyone, my name is Emi Velazquez. I'm from Argentina and I'm here with my collaborators. We want to present a little bit why we think that we can help with this problem. So what does a scientist do in their day-to-day life? They spend more than half their time looking for grants, publishing, writing papers in order to get grants. And where does this grant money come from? Normally from three institutions. Public funding, the European Union, the United States, you name it. Philanthropic foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and private corporations like Monsanto, Pfizer, whatever you can think. But what is the real currency of a scientist? It's the citations that they get. It's the papers that they publish. It's that kind of things that would let them get better positions, more grant money, and more funding. So where is this research published? In journals. So journals, they exist in 1776, and they have basically 4 qualities of things that they have to do. They have to register who did what. They have to store knowledge for the future, distribute that information to the world, and validate that information, for example, through peer review. So we can already see how these are things that a blockchain can help us accomplish. But why is this a broken model? Basically, we pay 3 times for the research that's done. A researcher has to go and find grants, normally from public institutions. So we pay for that. Then a researcher has to normally pay in order to get that paper published in a journal. And then the publisher charges for the access to that information. And that information sometimes is paid by the general public, and is something that belongs to everyone. So the journal model is the investigator pays for the journal in order to get their information published. Then the journal owns the copyrights of that research. The peer reviewers, that are the people that has the expertise in the area and they're supposed to validate what has been published in the paper, don't get paid. And then the public pays again through paywalls, through subscription models. We can cite, for example, Harvard had to scale down on the amount of journals that they have access to because it was getting too expensive. So if Harvard can pay for it, just imagine a university like in Argentina, for example, or anywhere else in the world. So this creates bad side effects and bad incentives. There's no incentive to reproduce research because who gets the citation? The person that published the paper or the person that reproduced the paper or the experiment? So the journals are now interested in publishing this because it doesn't get more attention for people that already saw the research that was done. And there's no incentive because it's more difficult for the researchers that publishes the first paper to standardize the data in a way that it can be easily reproduced, and takes more work to define the methods and everything that another team needs to validate this. The other problem is publication bias. So the thing is that the experts on the field that are in charge of doing the peer review of the process sometimes form the status quo. It's the status quo that defines what's good science and what's science that we shouldn't be researching on. So publishers basically have become the information gatekeepers. They restrict the flow of information just as the banks inhibit access to finance. So they're centralized entities that control the flow of this information that belongs to humanity. So what do we want to do with the Open Science Network? We want to remove that source of authority, and we want to eliminate the need to monetize publishing. We want to create different sets of tools for researchers that in turn can subsidize this publishing so there's no need to monetize it. Because if we only focus on monetizing, the publishing, if we only do publishing, then we need to monetize that publishing. And we want to create incentives for less popular, but research that is needed. So, for example, rare diseases that they don't have a commercial interest from pharma companies or from any commercial aspect that you can imagine, we can create incentives that allows us to do this research and communities to organize to fund the necessary things for the research to happen. So I'm just going to give an example. This is the Polymath project. So Tim Gowers in 2005 decided to solve a math problem by publishing in his blog. This was the first time that they were trying to solve a math problem in a crowdsourced way, just opening up mass collaboration, anyone can participate. And basically after 3 months, they managed to solve the problem. There was over 40 people that participated, and there were high school teachers from Australia, Field medalist winners, famous mathematicians, but they managed to solve it. And what is the thing with the Polymath project is that it's very difficult to attribute the value that it was created by each one of these people in this problem. Sorry. So one of the things that we're trying with the OSN, and we're doing different experiments, but what I want to talk to today is how do we use token incentives to track the value created in a solution in a crowdsourced problem. So what do we need in order to do this? First of all, we need a blockchain ID, a decentralized ID system that allows us to track the contributions and the value by every researcher around the world. Luckily, we don't need to start this from scratch because there are already ID systems like ORCID that is used by between 30–35% of researchers worldwide. And there's also universities IDs and the research ID network. And we can use this in order to jumpstart our blockchain ID system. And this will allow multiple stakeholder access, meaning that anyone around the world can participate and anyone around the world can receive funding for this research. And enable smart contracts in the way that in order to interact with the smart contracts in the network, they're going to need a blockchain ID. So this is a basic example. Like I said, we have different experiments, but this would be something based off the Polymath project, where we have 3 stakeholders. We have the creator of the problem, we have the reviewers, and the contributors. So the creator of the problem is someone that decides to throw a problem into the OSN network. And he picks a set of reviewers. Can be as many as he wants. The reviewers and the creators, they each get, let's say, 1,000 tokens that are for this specific problem. Yeah? So the contributors start adding contributions. And the reviewers and the creator can give these tokens to the contributions, depending on the value that they think they generated. When a certain contribution crosses a threshold, let's say 500 tokens, that person becomes a super contributor, and we assign an extra 1,000 tokens to that person to give to others. Yeah? So this is our way to try to experiment to see if we can map the value attributions in this problem. So the contract is always waiting for a paper proposal, that this can be done by the main researcher or by anyone in the network. When that proposal is accepted, it's published instantly, and the funding that the contract could receive from people that wants to incentivize the search of the solution here gets distributed based on the value attributions that we're mapping. So the incentive in this case is that the creator of the research, which is the one that's going to try to get people to work on it, is going to get the reviewers. They get a percentage of the funding. It says 5%, but it can be determined. The reviewers itself, they also get a percentage, which is distributed between how many reviewers there are. And the others is proportional to the amount of tokens that they have for that attribution. In this case, we're giving the funding after the case, but that doesn't have to be the case. We can do it before, we can do it in stages. And, well, so why is it good to distribute through this contract? Basically because we have the blockchain ID that tracks who did what, and is open for any researcher worldwide. And all research, successful or not, is published, which is a very important thing. and it's linked to the data and all of the contributions that happen, so teams worldwide don't repeat the same thing over and over again. So how do we do publication? Basically, the current model for journals comes from copying the model of papers and magazines. But there's no need for us to keep doing this. This is just a network effect. We have a GitHub-style versioning system that allows us the document to live in a constant stage of peer reviewing and evolution depending on the new information that we get. All content is published instantly, completely free. The files are stored in IPFS. And this allows us also to create bounty incentives. If you're anyone in the world that you think that this information should be more validated, then you can do a bounty on the peer review process. So once we have mapped all of these connections and all of these interactions between researchers and the papers that they publish, we can do some interesting funding mechanisms. These are just a few examples. I'm sure people can think already about different ones. But for example, we can do bounty-based research. This could be done by individuals, communities, corporations, people that want to organize around the idea. Like I said before with rare diseases, people can organize in order to fund more research to this. We can do a basic income model where there's already publications where, for example, they say, there was a paper published that they said that we should give researchers a basic salary of, for example, $100,000 a year. They get to keep $50,000, and the rest they have to distribute it to other research that they feel that they are doing good research. Yeah. So, I mean, we all just saw that presentation by Circles, and it was very interesting. So I'm sure we're going to talk to collaborate later. But this follows the blue sky approach, which is not all research is done by problem solution. Sometimes you just need to look at the sky and think. And lastly, we can use tokens to incentivize data gathering, connecting to data marketplaces, and provide more information for researchers. Okay, lastly, there's very interesting research being done by the Financial Engineering Department at MIT by Andrew Law and Roger Stein. Sorry, my throat. Where they're thinking about investing in pharma as securities, as financial securities. Because if a clinical trial, you spend $200 million, you have 1 in 20 chance of succeeding, and it takes 20 years. Yeah. So what if instead of investing in 1, we invest in 20 at the same time? That gives you a 98% of a potential investment return. So this is something that we can map with crypto assets, with tokens. We're not doing this now, but this is an idea for the future. What are pending problems? Scalability. We all here have the same problem. So particularly for OSN is legal compliance. Anything related to patents and intellectual property, which is the problems with having researchers working worldwide, and how do you fix the problems with that, and a way to standardize global grant submission processes. Where we are, what we need researchers, we need people that want to contribute to the project, we need research topics. We all talk about scalability issues. We're thinking about eating our own dog food in the sense that we want to solve the OSN scalability problems with the OSN network. So thank you very much. And we're going to be here, Mauro Velazquez and Mike, our collaborators. So if you want to meet us after the conference to talk about this, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you for the talk, first of all. I'm not a researcher by any sense of the word, but I am super interested in science. I am interested in science and the research that other people produce, so it's interesting that there are different approaches to how to solve journals and stuff, because that's a frustration as someone who consumes science, that everything's paywalled and the economics of that whole space is kind of fucked up, if I can say that. I guess my question to you would be, you mentioned that circles, the previous talk, kind of overlapped and there was the possibility of collaboration. What, again, blue sky, anything possible, like what would you see that collaboration as being? Thanks.
So we really need to expand more about how could it be possible, because one of the things with providing a basic income for researchers is to, how do you know the research, how you know the identity, how you prevent potential civil attacks. So like I said, those are basic ideas that we need to develop to see how it's possible to accomplish them. Yeah.
Not even paid.
That's good exercise.
Hello.
Hello.
University of Poitiers in France. I work in a laboratory, and well, what you propose is kind of interesting for the research field. But you start with a very interesting point. You said the system is broken. And one of the premises of your work is based on trust. Research are supposed to give them extra money, like this, that they received to other researchers based on the work that the other researchers have done. And right now, at least from my point of view, research field is a mafia. Mm-hmm. There are friends who held each other, they hold each other, and they keep publishing only stuff among themselves. If they are supposed to be giving money to other people who are working, how do you see that they overcome this mafia problem in which they will only be giving money to their own friends and not to the work that deserves to be paid for?
Okay, so it's similar to the idea of the basic income that was published. I'm going to link, I'll show you later when we finish the paper that was published about that, because and in that case, it is a problem. And the idea with this is not to change right away the entire incentives network. So that's why we want to start with blockchain problems, with problems that are easily proven on paper, so not connecting to hardware or laboratories, and start mapping the incentives. And that's also the idea of bringing more research to the conversation, that, like, you know about the current problems. So we don't just create this. That's the basic idea, is not replicating the same model on a blockchain. It's like going step by step and defining new incentives.
Thank you.
Nothing else? Okay, thank you very much.